So in times past, did Jupiter actually have a massive geophysical effect on the Earth? Could it have caused earthquakes, massive interplanetary discharges of electricity, lightning? This Greek mythology, does it have some bones of truth? Certainly Immanuel Velikovsky in his controversial book of the 50s, Worlds in Collision, believed this. Not only Jupiter, but other planets cause real damage, not mythological damage on Earth. But why did they obviously feared this deity Baal, this sky god, this planet? Now if we go back to Homer, the Odyssey and the Iliad, he succinctly portrays Zeus, the father of the gods, as he who threw thunderbolts on Earth. Certainly in the Trojan Wars, he was also responsible for earthquakes. He shattered the Earth. This is why these various civilizations feared God. Remember Schaefer and his stratigraphy revealing the total earthquake damage on 5 layers throughout the Middle East, India, Egypt. They built this citadel to worship Baal. The Emperor Trajan even had an oracle here which he consulted before going to war. The priesthood used their wives and daughters in holy prostitution to raise money and worship the god Baal. Earthquakes were a key theme in much of the mythology of this era. Homer told how mighty Zeus, or Baal as the Phoenicians knew him, cast thunderbolts on the earth and tumbled the walls of Troy with his earthquakes. The inhabitants of Baalbek feared Baal. They even sacrificed humans in an attempt to pacify him and prevent huge destructive earthquakes. But these earthquakes of Roman times were nothing compared to the continent-wide earthquakes that had shattered the Middle East in earlier times. What evidence do we have for this? In the mysterious tablets of Ugarit, discovered by Claude Schaefer, Baal is the god of rain, thunder and extraordinary bolts of lightning. The worship of Baal extended in this region to the Jews, Canaanites and the Phoenicians. But Herodotus informs us that God was also known under many other names, such as Jupiter of the Romans, Zeus of the Greeks, Mazda of the Persians, and Ammon of the Egyptians. Priests instructed the people that the bright sky god Baal was responsible for droughts, plagues, earthquakes, and other calamities. The Phoenicians were superb shipbuilders. Although based in what is present-day Lebanon, their trade networks allowed the worship of Baal to spread throughout the Mediterranean. In those early days, the Phoenicians inhabited Lebanon. They were fantastic seafarers, and their trade networks extended as far as Spain, Africa, even Britain, and their beliefs followed them. The cult of Baal was attacked many times, but was never extinguished. Kings and other royalty of the 10 biblical tribes also worshipped this supreme god. History claims the Phoenicians carried out bizarre rituals to appease their gods. What sort of rituals were they? And what motivated them? Greek and Latin sources mention the offering of children as sacrifices by fire at the Phoenician colony of Carthage around 814 BC. The Greek historians Diodorus and Plutarch both mention the burning of children as an offering to the Carthaginians' chief god Baal-Hamon. Diodorus wrote, "There was in their city a bronze image of Baal, extending his hands, palms up and sloping towards the ground, so that each of the children, when placed thereon, rolled down and fell into a gaping pit filled with fire." According to the historian Roy Decker, they even attempted to save their kin by substituting servant children. Nevertheless, when the city was threatened by Roman armies, earthquakes, drought and famine, the high priests ruthlessly sought Baal's appeasement. The religion spawned numerous priests and priestesses expert in the dramatic ceremonies of incense burning and the offering of burnt sacrifices. Officiating priests danced around the altars, chanting frantically and cutting themselves with knives. The citizens were worked up into great frenzies at the prospect of displeasing Baal. In times of great turbulence, human sacrifices, particularly children, were made to this father of the gods. For these purposes, a ceremonial burning ground called the Tophet, or roasting place, was established. At these ceremonies, even the most powerful families had to produce a victim to placate Baal Hamoth. Archaeologist Lawrence Steger, who excavated at Carthage, notes Diodorus and Plutarch and church fathers like Tertullian condemn the Carthaginians for the practice of child sacrifice. Some add lurid but unverifiable details to the sacrifices, witnessed by distraught mothers, grimacing victims consumed by flames, human offerings received in the outstretched arms of a brazen statue. But on one point, these sources are completely in accord. The Carthaginians sacrificed their children to their supreme god. Steger maintains that stelae associated with burial urns found at Carthage bear decorations alluding to sacrifice and inscriptions expressing vows to Phoenician deities. Since human sacrifice is the most horrendous of the religious perversions that occurred at these shrines, the term high places became a synonym for shrines to Baal engaged in human sacrifice. Could Baalbek have been such a place? Only one firm piece of evidence exists, that of Balthazar Moncones, who in 1647 reached Baalbek and describes a relief depicting a sacrifice in the lower part of the Pronaos wall. After the Romans finally defeated Carthage and totally destroyed the city, they engaged in post-war propaganda to make their arch-enemies seem cruel and less civilized. If human sacrifice occurred at Baalbek, then likewise the Roman conquerors would have stamped out the practice which had been outlawed by its Senate. Human sacrifice was not, however, limited to Phoenicia and its colonies. The worshippers of Baal practiced their grisly rites throughout the Middle East. In the city of Jezreel, now situated in present-day Israel, we discover further evidence. In the book of Kings from the Old Testament, Ahab was described as a notoriously wicked king. Under the influence of his evil wife Jezebel, Ahab built altars to Baal. In another case from the Old Testament, we read of King Hiel's rebuilding of Jericho, wherein he sacrificed his firstborn son Abraham and his younger son Segub. This is an explicit reference to what are called foundational sacrifices, where the victims' bodies were placed within the walls or under its foundations. This practice was also followed around the Dead Sea in nearby Canaan. We even have evidence from the Hebrew Bible. The 6th century BC prophet Jeremiah accused syncretizing Judahites of setting up a high place of Tophet in the valley of Ben Hinnom outside Jerusalem. There they burned their sons and their daughters in the fire. Allow me to turn your attention to Nimrod, as Baal was also known. It is important that you know that Nimrod incorporated into his worship system the grisly practice of human sacrifice and cannibalism. Our authority Hislop says, the priests of Nimrod or Baal were necessarily required to eat of the human sacrifices, and thus it has come to pass that Kana Baal, Kana meaning priest, and Baal referring to Baal, is the established word cannibal in our own tongue for a devourer of human flesh. As Steger concludes, the classical and biblical texts, as well as the archaeology, all indicate that healthy living children were sacrificed to the gods in the Tophet. Our purpose in making this case is not to malign the Phoenicians, but to understand them. The Baal-based religion revolved around the cycles of nature necessary for survival and prosperity in the ancient world, primarily growing crops or raising livestock as well as the growth of human populations. So we can see the most prevalent religious system in the immediate Canaanite and Phoenician context was the worship of Baal. As with most mythology, the entire story is complex, varying in details and emphasis between peoples. The basic features, however, are fairly simple. For many reasons, human fertility was an important concern. Lack of fertility in times of stress was widespread. Egyptian texts support these curious phenomena. The Babylonian creation hymn Enuma Elish describes a great battle amongst the gods. However, out of this battle between the sky gods, order was returned from chaos. The deities returned to their rightful place in the heavens, and the cycles of nature were re-established. Trembling in fear, mankind sought to control the planets he worshipped as sky gods. He resorted to bloody rituals in an effort to calm their pestilence and destruction. Could this be related to the uncertainties of life in the ancient world? The second group of texts come from Ugarit in northern Syria. They're chiefly concerned with the emergence of Baal, king of the gods. Baal was the storm god. With the help of his sister Anat, the goddess of war, and Astarte, the goddess of fertility, Baal defeated Yam and all his cohorts. But Baal was challenged by Mot, god of death and the underworld. Mot temporarily triumphed and Baal was banished to the underworld. This myth is explicitly concerned with fertility, especially human sexuality. The myth gives assurance of some stability in the physical world assisted by humans. The actual worship of Baal was carried out in terms of imitative magic, whereby sexual acts by both male and female temple prostitutes were understood to arouse Baal, who then brought rain to make Mother Earth fertile. When crops were abundant, Baal was praised and thanked for his abundant rain. It is in this context that drought had such impact throughout the biblical traditions. Not only was lack of rain a threat to survival, it was also a sign that the gods of the Baal mythology were unhappy. The prophet Hosea suggests, and Jeremiah graphically depicts, the debauchery and excesses that developed in the worship of Baal. Because of the sexual overtones of Baal worship, it was easy to use the metaphor of adultery or prostitution to describe the problem that such syncretism raised. The Israelites struggled with Baal worship until the time of the exile, especially after its official establishment as a state religion for a time during the reign of Ahab and Jezebel around 850 BC. The second characteristic of ancient religions was belief in magic, which the ancients' attitude towards their gods manifested. The people firmly believed that by their actions they could manipulate and control the gods. These religious practices seem brutal to our modern eyes. Could these extreme rituals have been adopted as a direct response to a very hostile environment?
During the Roman period, it was like orgies temple. It was wine, women, and drugs. It was like super nightclub during the Roman period, like Ukraine now.
Discotheque.
Yeah. So you can see the stones there. It tells alone that there have been orgies here. You can smell it.
We have here the representation of Bacchus ladies, dancing ladies. The grapes, from grapes we make wine, and wine was the drink of the ritual of Bacchus, and the vine leaves. And on one side we have the egg shape, is the egg is the symbol of fertility, and the arrow in between the two eggs, so we have arrow is symbol of death. So we have life, death, all along the monumental entrance. And on the other stripe we have the shape of a poppy. Poppy is a drug. The drug puppy also was a symbol cult of Bacchus.
Holy prostitution. I find it hard reconciling these two words. Holy, we mean piety and purity and religiosity. Prostitution conjures up images of debauchery, sexual excess and scandal. But I've never had to suffer drought, plague, unending earthquakes. I've never seen my land desertified and reduced to ashes. If we put ourselves in this picture, we may begin to understand why the worshippers of Baal were driven to such excesses. They were fearful, they were scared. They freely gave of their wives and daughters and sons to the service of the temple. By these excesses, they sought to encourage fertility. The people firmly believed that by their actions they could manipulate and control the gods. By examining the mythology and the physical evidence at the site, we found they exhorted to extreme rituals to appease their gods. These people lived in fear of earthquakes and thunderbolts. So what is Baalbek all about? If the people of Baalbek feared Baal, who's also known as Jupiter, could this sky god have driven their destiny? Both myth and legend go much further to support the malignant role of Jupiter in mankind's affairs. Remember, Jupiter goes by many names. In ancient Phoenicia, he is Baal of Baalbek. In Israel, he is Zedek. In Egypt, he is Ammon. In India, he is Shiva. In ancient Greece, he is Zeus, king of the gods. In all cases, he is the supreme deity. This supreme planet is blamed for hurling thunderbolts against the earth and causing earthquakes. Homer in the Iliad specifically blames Zeus for hurling thunderbolts and causing the destruction of Troy with earthquakes. Baal shattered the earth. That's why the citizens of Baalbek feared and worshipped this sky god. They performed extreme rituals to calm his destructive power. Today, Jupiter casts thunderbolts at its moon Io. Thus, interplanetary discharges do occur. The close approach of a comet would have produced just such a massive electrical discharge. Or alternatively, Jupiter coming close by the Earth would have affected its magnetosphere. All these things would have produced horrific damage on Earth. Tsunamis unseen of today, huge earthquakes, volcanoes and terrifying storms. These events were witnessed by the ancients and it affected their religion and it was recorded in their mythology. In the past, we have had massive extinctions due to cosmic events. In the early century of the Prison era, the Romans at one time counted 50 comets in their skies. This is unheard of today. Will the skies over Rome the end of a bloody era that only in recent centuries has become stabilised? Can there be bones of truth in this mythology? So how do we explain these dreadful cataclysms that decimated mankind? Baalbek's just one example. Conventional science is lost. It rejects mythology. It clings to outmoded scientific concept. It's bogged down in theory-laden ideas. Velikovsky's previously neglected ideas inspire us to look at the world in a totally new light. Let's draw together these disciplines, these different sciences, archaeology, history, mythology, compare them, and if we do that, we'll get the answers we seek. New developments in science and technology are changing the way we view the world. Not only will it change the way we look at the future, but the way we look at the past. The age of cataclysmic evolution and the mechanics of the chaotic solar system have arrived. What happens on planet Earth today is nothing as compared to events of the recent past. Join us as we seek the truth.
In the search of the lands, can the myths be a reality? Did the planets cast the mighty stones, the keys in the hills? It's as old as the hills. Did the battles cause such casualties? Did the plagues and famine count for them? Will we ever see their kind again? The key is written in the hills. It's as old as the hills. Did the sky gods send the wrath from high, or did the chaos rise from dungeons deep? Will the seas reveal their treasures to us? The key is light beneath the hills. Yes, it's hidden in the hills. The answer's older than the